stable, but they do change their orbits on occasion. It's generally not from hitting another asteroid. It's generally from coming close to a planet, like Jupiter in most cases for the ones further out, or the ones that come by Earth, when they come near the Earth's gravity does change their orbit. Okay, but then they end up in a very stable configuration with repeats over and over and over again until they come close to something again.
But if you think about any asteroid that hits the Earth, if you back up time, probably came near the Earth many times before that. And coming near the Earth enabled the final impact. So that's often the case. And that gets into some of the complexity we won't deal with.
I'll give you a good order of magnitude thing. We can roughly predict pretty well the location of an asteroid once I've measured its trajectory well for about 100 years. Okay, so that's about the time scale at which you need to repeat the survey, right? So once you do this survey well, you can come back in about 100 years and redo it again. So that'll be our gift to our great-grandchildren.
But if you're tracking 10 million asteroids, repeating that cycle means you're doing hundreds of thousands every year, again and again. So. Here we go.
So the big challenge I heard is finding the asteroids. I'm asking the question, is it an economic issue, a technology issue, or something else?
It's a policy issue. Again, think that this would be a fraction of 1% of NASA's budget, okay? Where's the clamor in the public to get their representatives to push NASA to do that? That's how the process works, okay? Now, you could also just simply say, hey, we can get an enlightened group of 5 billionaires and we could do it. And that's been what we've been working on. And we've raised a lot of money, but we have not yet raised enough money to build the whole thing. Okay, so I think you could argue that it's in the public good, but it's not due to technology limitations, and it's not because it's an enormous amount of money.
The assumption you cannot make is that federal agencies act in the public interest. Seriously. Public agencies are set up to do very specific things within their enabling legislation. And this is not within NASA's enabling legislation. NASA is responsible for doing space science and for doing exploration. This is not science. This is public protection. Now, nevertheless, the fundamental job of government anywhere, everywhere, is public safety, security. And yet that fundamental issue here has never been assigned by our government to any entity, and the obvious logical entity is NASA. Nor has this happened in any other country. So at the moment, there is no governmental entity to provide this, who has the responsibility of dealing with it. Therefore, NASA cannot request money for something it doesn't have the responsibility to do.
Right now, you're looking at a fair fraction of the people on Earth who've really taken this on as their life's work.
And we've testified in front of Congress on this, and the Congress has come that close to taking the right action, but it never seems to happen. So finally, Ed decided 3 years ago, great, let's do it ourselves, and that's how Sentinel came along. But we found out that that was a pretty difficult job to raise that amount of money as opposed to building a bike lane. Yeah.
Okay, I have two questions. The first one has to do with crowdsourcing. Have you undertaken any?
Crowdsourcing, if you want to raise $10 million.
No. I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about activism for people to help locate, getting involved in doing the computational stuff and those kind of crowdsourcing things where you have a community of enthusiasts
Planetary defense at home
who are doing that, right? Yeah. And the second one is, have you made a run at Homeland Security?
Okay. Do you want FEMA to have this job? I heard no. They have lots of money, right?
Homeland Security, particularly, has lots of money.
They don't spend it on things like this.
Right. They don't know how to deflect things in space. This is a job which NASA should have. Now, the other possible solution, by the way, is the Defense Department, okay? And people say, oh, that's logical. We're talking planetary defense. This is protecting us from this thing. But think about the geopolitical thing that I showed, okay? You don't know where it's going to hit. You don't have any idea which country it's going to hit, and at the time you have to make a decision, you don't even know if it's definitely going to hit the Earth, in many cases at least, okay? So what do? You tell the rest of the world, don't sweat it, the U.S. Department of Defense is going to save your butt. Right. You know what you get? I'm not going to make the finger symbol to you, but that's the answer you get, all right? I mean, the U.S. Department of Defense, we're going to put our country, France or something, you know, to the Defense Department, and especially if they want to use, there's some of the crazies that want to use nukes in space. Forget it. There has to be trust. When you're dealing with something like this, where, as Ed said, the property values, once one of those lines comes out and the probability of impact starts going up and up, the property values are going to start going down and down, and if somebody's going to protect that, deflect that asteroid, the public has got to have faith in that. And I'll tell you, the rest of the world is not going to have faith if the U.S. Department of Defense is going to be pushing.
I'll tell you what brings faith in the process, and that's openness.
Yeah.
Publishing the data, allowing anybody to look at that data and analyze it independently. And if they're all doing their physics correctly, they will get the same, you know, results, okay? And then you can have a conversation about what to do when everybody trusts it. I think that's what's important.
Now, here's where Ed and I have a slight disagreement, so let me make that clear. Ed I am very suspicious of governments. I've dealt with government for a long time, and the reason why NGOs, non-governmental organizations, like B612 or like the Association of Space Explorers, are important is because you have a non-governmental entity overseeing and making sure that the public, well, to the extent they can, that the public interest is being served, not the government interest. And governments will head south anytime, you know, the overseers take the pressure off. So that's why it's important that this be open. But I want to be careful here. NASA is being open to a certain extent. But to show you what the limits of that are, NASA Ed showed one slide that showed the JPL Sentry data that you have there, the size of the asteroid, what date it might hit, energy, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So all that data is on the web every day, and it gets updated in real time. And it's on the web for anybody to look at. This is not classified anything at all. What they don't do is convert that very same data from numbers into a line across the planet. Because that's real. People get it when there's a line across Iowa, you know?
The other thing they don't do is show their work. They give you the end result. And there's a big trust me on it.
Well, but the Italians do the same thing. So you do have some capability to cross-check, but
It's pretty limited.
Hello. I just wanted to say thanks. First of all, you guys gave a great presentation. It was really fantastic. I'm far from an expert on these things, but so forgive me if my question's a bit simple. But I was trying to figure out how exactly do you guys figure out where to position? How would you figure out where to position the Sentinel mission? Or I'm sort of trying to figure out why are there so many things looking at the stars and we still have so much trouble seeing the asteroids that are out there?
It's an optimization problem where we put Sentinel. But first of all, why do we have difficulty seeing things right now? It's because asteroids are small and dark. And you think of an object that's, you know, only, you know, the size of this building, right? And put it a few million miles away from Earth. You know, think of something, you know, 1,000 times further away than from here to Paris, okay? How do you see something like that? That they have to come right now, as things stand, they need to come relatively close to Earth before one of our telescopes can pick them up, okay? And that's why we have such a small number of them have been tracked. Okay, the LSSC telescope is going to change a lot of that because you can see them at much greater distances because it is just ginormous. That's a technical term. Now, why did we decide to put Sentinel interior to the Earth? The reason is because you want it to be able to face away from the sun, number one. You want it to be able to see Earth's orbit because anything that hits the Earth has to cross Earth's orbit, right? So it spends part of the time between the Earth and the sun, okay? So you want to be interior. You don't want to be too close to the sun because then I don't care about ones that, then I'm further away from Earth's orbit. It makes it harder to scan Earth's orbit. The area that I want to have my most sensitivity is around Earth's orbit because that's the place that they have to cross in order to hit the Earth. And a whole bunch more optimization to go in there, but that's basically it.
It gets too technical.
So what I think I've learned is that what we're lacking to get real action on this is a timely and credible threat. And you have taught us that timely means 20 years. So my question is, with the increase in satellite discovery and data bringing in, how long before we get the 20-year warning, which will cause some organization on the Earth to create the ADF, the Asteroid Defense Force?
Well, right now, the thing that you can either, from the majority of asteroids, you get no warning because we just haven't even seen them yet, okay? That we don't have any measurements of their orbits, okay? So if LSST is the only thing out there, it's going to take it about 12 years to reach the midpoint of its finding the things that are roughly the size of a 100 megaton explosion, not much smaller. If you can bring online either Sentinel or NeoCam, you can bring that down so to another, so roughly 10 to 15 years from now, we should be pretty close to finishing off this survey if we can get Sentinel flown, for instance. Yes, it does give you 20-year warnings.
But I'm going to answer your question in a different way. The question is not technically how long does it take or what. The question is, when is a legitimate, responsible agency going to take the responsibility for it? It's not a matter of can you do it. We can do all of this, but it has not ever been assigned to anybody to do. What we have to do is get the government to assign responsibility for the survival of life on Earth from this particular natural hazard. This is like any other natural hazard, with the one exception. It comes from space. It's a cosmic natural hazard. It happens very infrequently, but it's real and it's potentially very big, and it can be prevented. Okay? We can't stop floods. We can't stop hurricanes. This can be done. But it's got to be assigned to somebody to be responsible, or else there's nobody to hold accountable. So the political issue of an assignment of responsibility is a thing that we've all got to see happen.
Can you comment on the latest talk on asteroid mining? Will that affect or help?
Oh, asteroid mining.
Thank you.
There are a couple of companies which claim someday off in the far, far future that they will reach a point where they will eventually be able to mine asteroids for the purposes of using rocket fuel in space, essentially. Okay, what they are all working on today is the precursor to the precursor to the precursor to the mission that leads up to the mission that leads up to the mission to get there. Okay, so right now they're building small spacecraft to fly in low Earth orbit with a cell phone inside. Okay, it's a step along the way. There's a lot of companies that are doing space commercialization efforts. We're a long ways from there because you also have to have, you need to have a market.
In the long run, it's going to be very important because the whole
So define long run, Rusty.
yes, it's a long term, but the whole economy of further long-term development in space will be totally altered when the resources that are needed are already in space and we don't have to drag them up out of the Earth's gravity well. So that, the economics is extremely powerful, but as Ed said, it's a long way off. Happy it's starting now. But asteroids are not only threat. They're also tremendous potential benefit for science and everything else. I mean, there's a lot of reasons to pay attention to asteroids.
I think I'm beginning to feel some of your pain. The mere knowledge of a potential strike is of incredible financial value. And to even publicize it, you begin to diminish some of that value. And I'm struggling with exactly how can that be done. In other words, if there is a source that's gathering this information and they have an idea of some potential strikes, and they have enough insight to be able to begin to understand the magnitude and
To play the market, in other words, right?
right, you begin to hold on to the information. So even the large optical satellite, if someone were developing an advanced database of these future events, to even publicize it, that database begins to lose value. And so it takes a fundamental change in the way that humankind deals with each other. If I'm sitting here in the northern hemisphere and I'm footing the bill for this defense shield, then I automatically don't care about anything in the southern hemisphere, automatically. And then when things are of a potential strike nature, a strike event, then my first option is, how do I ensure that I push it away from me? And if the knowledge that that event is out there is not known, and you have private decisions being made, then all of a sudden, it's a really difficult situation to be in. Because even for the ground-based telescope you talked about, I asked myself, who's going to ensure that that the entire database that's discovered is going to be published? Someone must hold it.
That's exactly right. Who is that? Right. It's something that we've been taking on. But I think we're the only organization out there really looking at these questions. But you are absolutely right. All your points are correct. How can you ensure trust in the process, right? And I can tell you how not to do that. That's to make your decisions in private, not be transparent about what you're doing, put out the stuff and not show your work, and so on. And I really want to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Global warming is the #1 crisis everyone thinks, and that's not proven or known, and yours is proven, so.
Yeah, there's
Very different problem.
Yeah, there are a lot of people use the climate issue or global warming as an analog with this issue. And there are certainly some things that are similar. It's a global problem. It's a long-term problem. It's a huge issue, okay? But there are other things which are very, very different. To deal with climate change or global warming, everybody's got to change their behavior. It's a huge economic issue. This costs almost nothing. It's $1.98. It's a half of 1% or a third of 1% of NASA's budget. That's nothing, okay? And you don't have to change your behavior at all. Nobody does. This is just a matter of assuming responsibility with knowledge that you have to prevent disaster, okay? So they're very different in a lot of, and the science here is done. There's no question about the equations that are used or anything else. I mean, this is all very well understood telescopic observations, space technology.
Yeah, I want to sort of hammer on that one point that Rusty said. NASA regularly sends probes to places around the solar system, right? We just saw one that went all the way to Pluto, which is incredibly far. It's many, many times further than Mars, okay? We've sent probes to the moons of Saturn, okay? And even today, before we launch something, a mission that might be 10 years off, you can go to a mission planner's office and tell me, and he can tell you the trajectory that we're going to put it on, to land it on, at a particular crater, the particular side of a particular crater on Mars. How did they do that? This is because NASA does understand trajectories very, very, very well. Okay, so this is a kind of computation that is tractable, is doable, and we do it all the time. Partially it is. There's a technical component to building telescopes. It's an interesting cross-disciplinary problem.
Yeah, two things. I did a story today about the Halloween asteroid, and which is going to be 1.3 lunar orbital away. And the camera interviewing me said, "Well, how many months have we known about this?" And I said, "We discovered it October the 10th." And his eyes got huge. And that was the point I never thought of, making, that we probably should be making more often, that when we talk about these asteroids coming close to us, we discovered them yesterday.
Yeah.
Or 2 days ago.
By the way, for those who don't know what that is, this is a recently discovered, just a few days ago,
October 10th.
asteroid that is large. It's something like 400 meters across, okay?
Yeah.
So that is roughly
than
1,000
that.
times larger than the one, 1,000 times larger in mass than the one that took out that area roughly the size of, Houston out to Beltway 8, okay? So,
Yeah, it's big.
yeah, so that, 1,000 times more destructive than the one that would only take out Houston out to Beltway 8, okay? So that is a large asteroid.
And it's eccentric, and it's possibly more icy than most. So it's a fascinating asteroid. Yeah. Well, my second thought was, we don't panic about hurricanes because we have shared risk. Everybody pays into the pool, and if you have land in, property in Galveston, you may lose it, but you're going to get paid back because but you didn't pay that much insurance. It's almost a shame that we can't do that very simple, almost private sector approach to this, because it's much less, damaging, that you share the risk and everybody pays a small amount before anybody knows who's going to get hit. Once you know who's going to get hit, it becomes difficult. But but if you make it a shared risk assignment based upon the economic value of the property on the surface of the earth,
Isn't that what taxes are?
yeah, but you're going to have to make this a new one.
Well, I would suggest that NASA has an $18 billion a year budget right now.
Who has the microphone?
I was just going to say, it sounded like it.
Oh, but it went off. We'll repeat it. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Hello? Hello?
Now you go.
It sounded like when you described the event in Russia that you already came up with the conclusion that Twitter is the way that the groundswell can happen. So if we are the government, the people are the government, and you want to be transparent, how about starting a Twitter account?
I don't think it caused a groundswell. It's just the way that certain people found out about it. Okay.
But nonetheless, that is the way to be transparent and to communicate with the broad spectrum of society that is using social media and trying to approach.
I think you're generally correct, but I do think that this is a problem that requires more than short slogans, which is what Twitter is ideal for.
Think of our presentation tonight in 140 character bites.
You need a lot of them.
Yeah, would you be reading all those Twitter things? No.
I think you need to do both.
You've got to go deep, because people are not going to take action on just an arm wave. I mean, people need to understand this issue, at least to some extent, in order to form the pressure on the governments to act responsibly.
I don't think we have that kind of society. People are preoccupied with their internal affairs of their home, of their jobs, of their local problems. And if it doesn't impact you personally, you can't relate to it. So you have to
That's a problem. Then we're going to get hit.
but marketing takes multiple strikes.
Yep.
So you have to just bombard people with little Twitters of it. I don't
Did you take part in Asteroid Day on the 30th of June? Right, exactly. And that's one of the ways in which we are trying to get to people on a worldwide basis, is we formed a thing called Asteroid Day, because basically what Ed and I were doing.
successful now.
I'm sorry?
Are you successful now?
No.
Well, there's your problem.
And by using Twitter, we're going to be successful?
That's an example. You can use Wikipedia, you can use whatever you want.
Okay.
You have to get into social media, and you have to make it sexy.
Right.
So
Go to Asteroid.
and they come up, and there's a
there's all kinds of stuff on the web all about this.
Wait, can I think you're fundamentally correct, okay? But I think we also need to be realistic about the amounts of money it takes generally for those types of campaigns. It takes grassroots organizations, which, you know, it's like a political campaign, right? Or for instance, you know, climate change, all right? You know, that took hundreds of millions of dollars of lobbyist money. It really did, you know, or to organize things. It didn't happen without money, okay? So really, in the end, it's about money. To do those sorts of things. I mean, I used to work at Google, and I know a little bit about, you know, social media campaigns and things like that. And very, 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 very few of them are completely viral. 99.99998% of them are funded, okay, and with large amounts of money. That's where Google makes all its money, okay? It is advertising and media, and those campaigns are not cheap. Those campaigns run into the hundreds of millions of dollars, just like a political campaign. So it does, in the end, roll around to money. And not that we're not trying that, but it is very difficult to get people's attention amongst all the things out there.
Another important thing to stress is the bigger asteroid impacts also create a global winter problem by throwing so much dust in the air. And so right now, I think the number is we only have 3 months worth of food on Earth.
That's correct.
And I think famine is going to be a huge worldwide consequence of one of these big ones. It's not going to be just your little skinny line that's going to be hurt.
That's for the larger asteroids. You make a very good point, and in fact, that is why it's generally accepted that a kilometer or larger asteroid would wipe out human civilization. And the reason is the following. A 1 kilometer asteroid, doesn't matter where on Earth it hits, the line is immaterial by the time you get that size, throws up enough dust to end growing seasons, northern and southern hemisphere, for a number of years, okay? And again, with 3 months of food on Earth, things turn south really badly by year 3, right? Or by year 1, right? So that is the reason why generally it's accepted that a kilometer or larger, that's whatever civilization comes out the other side looks very, very different than what went in, okay? But you're correct. The line is immaterial for the very large ones, but those are rare. Only every 500,000 years or so does that happen, okay? And, or call it 1 million years. So in your lifetime, there's only about a 0.01% chance that in your lifetime you witness the end of human civilization.
And the downside of of emphasizing that is that people accuse you of being inflammatory and alarmist, and that's right. If you take something that is extremely low probability of what you're talking about and emphasize that one because it's so disastrous, you're generating fear, you're being alarmist, and you immediately terminate your credibility. So you have to be very, very careful of that, and we're always very careful of it, frankly. You should not lose any sleep on this, any more than you lose sleep about tomorrow you're going to drive on the freeway to Austin, but you have insurance on your car. Okay? Why do you get insurance on your car? Not because you're scared shitless, but because it's sensible to do it. We need to buy insurance, which is what Ed and I are talking about, for the survival of humanity. We don't need to panic. It's not a frightening story. It's an opportunity to ensure the future. Yeah.
So earlier you educated us on that's really a policy issue. So am I oversimplifying it by thinking that we just have to find one?
One what?
One asteroid that'll ruin our day.
Yes, you are correct. I believe that is correct. If we knew of one in particular that was going to hit on a particular date, let's say we found it tomorrow and everyone agreed, man, that thing's going to hit in whatever number of years, and it was large, that would galvanize action completely. Or the worst way to have this happen is to have a large city get destroyed tomorrow, right? And then the day after that, there will be heads rolling because, like, why didn't we do anything about this? You know, the same people who wanted to not do anything about it will be the ones calling for somebody's head, all right? But you are correct. But I think I don't think we should wait for that.
So
you can't do it. Look, you can't do it. It's a nice idea, but what you're going to get is the same thing I showed there. You're going to get a line and not a point. You're not going to be able to say where it's going to be in 20 years. Okay? You're going to say It could be anywhere along this line that goes by the Earth. But it may not hit the Earth. That's the problem. And you need to be really, really careful. In the same way you need to maintain your credibility by not trying to scare people, you need to maintain your credibility.
I think he's talking about when you get the uncertainty down to within the Earth and that it is going to hit.
That's when it's a credible threat.
But you're not going to know that ahead of time. You're going to already have made the decision
So
to deflect it or not.
that argument, I agree with the argument.
You will.
No.
I agree with the argument, but we've got a pattern. Humanity's got a pattern, I think, of the
Acting after the fact.
dot-com bubble no one believed in. I think
Katrina
of,
before
The perfect example is New Orleans, right? They
Yeah.
knew that the next major hurricane was going to wipe them out.
nobody fixed the levee.
And then when did they really get serious about fixing the levees? Right after Katrina.
irrational exuberance, 2008. We knew about it 8 years in advance, and we still closed our eyes.
So-
It is a big challenge of not being able to want to see.
How do we not be like that is the question.
That's the question.
The way we be that way is we pray for a 40-meter object to hit in the middle of the ocean. That's the way we do it. Yeah. But unfortunately, we don't control that.
Or yeah. Wait, we have somebody who can solve the problem here.
I got the mic. And my question is very simple. I'm very interested in knowing what your reception has been in other countries. Because you have said you've been traveling and putting on your presentation, but we don't know who is eager to work with you, who is deaf to your presentation. I'm very curious to know what's happening
Private
globally.
individuals have been quite willing to step up. We have major donors from quite a number of countries. We have donors from 43, I believe, countries. Okay. The official channels are slightly different things because then you start getting into policy and so on. Rusty, you can talk a little bit about that. But there is interest in some areas, like European Space Agency, for instance. But real interest is measured in money.
Enough said.
I'd like to ask a question, a personal one, and that is when and what and how caused you to get this burr under your saddle to dedicate what you've dedicated to this task? How did it start for each of you?
Okay, look, the answer in my case, and I think I can say this for Ed as well, is very simple. We know from our education, because we're astronauts, because we're intelligent people who, have an idea what's going on, we know that we can find asteroids and are finding them. Therefore, we know we can predict future impacts. We know that we can deflect them. And if you know that there's a disaster that's pending and you can prevent it, how do you not do it? If it's space technology, we happen to be in the space technology business, how can you know about a potential wipeout and be able to prevent it and not act? And so for the last 14 years, we've been dedicating our lives to doing what we can to bring that awareness to people, to beat on NASA, to push on the Congress, on the federal government, to act responsibly in the public interest. But there are many, many, many institutional, pragmatic, hard-nosed reasons why that doesn't happen or why that's hard to do. That's why I say you should never make the assumption that the government is motivated primarily by the public interest. It often does, and thank heaven does, and we try to make it more consonant with it. But this is something different. It's not, a linear extension of anything that's been going on before. This is sort of a new understanding of the threat and the ability to stop it. Before we get done, I want to just add one more thing. I want to step back from this, which I always tend to do at the end of any presentation I make. Step back and think about the big picture here. We live in a moment in time where technology that we've developed, and Ed and I have been fortunate enough to be, our pink bodies involved in it and flying in space, okay? But we happen to live in a moment in time when we can take a technology and stop something which can end this experiment of life and evolution in our little corner of the universe called planet Earth and life, the only life that we actually know of at the moment in the universe. And we can do that by using this technology, which we've invented and which we control, in order to very, very slightly adjust the shape of the local universe so that life is enhanced. Here, the future of life is enhanced. It's incredible that we can literally talk seriously about the capability of reshaping the solar system very slightly by moving these asteroids so that life continues here on Earth. Now, to me, that is an incredible opportunity and a tremendous responsibility and a privilege to be living at this moment in history. But that's got to be converted into political action and determination. It's not money. It's assuming the responsibility for the future of life. So that's my shtick.
So with that, what is the challenge that you're giving to us listening to you? What will we take away when we walk out of this door?
There's the
Challenges.
There's the classic question, and it's a one which, and Ed has to speak for himself, I'll speak for myself on that. For the first 11 years when I ran this organization, and even for 2 years after Ed was running it, the thing Ed said a few moments ago is what I not only believed, but guided my action and where I was directed, which is basically to take the people, the handful of people, really, the hundreds, let me say, seriously speaking, of people who could literally, by deciding to do it, bring this about. The Congress, the Office of the Science, the President's Science Advisor and OSTP, OMB, you can name a few hundred people who could make this happen. And I directed my action, our action, at those people because they're the decision makers. But I've concluded, frankly, and changed my mind in the last 2 years, deciding that that really won't work. It hasn't worked. We haven't been able to get that kind of cooperation and vision and assumption of responsibility. And so my sense is we have to go to the public, to educate the public, and to have the public become the squeaky wheel for the continuation, the long-term continuation and evolution of life on this planet. And without the general public understanding this issue to some extent, at least sufficiently, and becoming a squeaky wheel for long-term responsibility, especially when it doesn't cost anything. I mean, it's peanuts. That is the way I now believe we have to direct it. But it is not an easy job to inform and educate people about something which is, aside from a few astronauts and cosmonauts, outside of intuitive understanding of how the world works. That's the challenge.
Yeah, I have a very similar view, but not exactly the same. And that was, I think it was absolutely the right thing for us to do, to go head out into looking for private support. For the first 11 years, we didn't really raise any money, other than, a few $1,000s here and there, because we didn't need anything. We were
did the work ourselves,
yeah, we were,
as an organization.
exactly.
In fact, we paid to do it.
Going and raising money is not easy. There are a million worthwhile causes, many of which target your heart, many of which are in your local areas, many of which affect you or your family members directly. And those get the vast, vast, vast majority of philanthropic support. But I do think that we have turned the millions of dollars that we have raised into catalyzing some action. Remember I said things have turned in the last few years. LSST got approval. Well, how did that happen? Okay. NASA may actually fly their NEOCAM mission. How did that happen? The European Space Agency is considering flying a deflection test demonstration mission. How did that happen? Well, I think a lot of it is really because we've catalyzed this. I mean, we've been in we're in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times. We've been on the front page of both of those multiple times. We've been on CNN and you name it. We've been there. We've been telling our story. We've testified in front of Congress. I've done it at least 3 times. You've probably done it 4 or 5 times. We make regular visits to to Washington, D.C. We talk to people, and we've done actual work to show what's going, what's possible, what you can build, and I think that's helped make all these things happen. So again, this isn't a binary thing where suddenly problem solved. No, it's bit by bit by bit. And if you stand back and look at just the last 3 years, it's been huge progress. And I really think we have been the catalyst for that. So I think, whenever I see our donors, and like I said, we have thousands of donors, but we have, less than roughly 50 or so, what I would call our major donors that have provided roughly 90% of our funding, which is true for most philanthropic organizations. But those 50 people have really catalyzed all this change, okay? And I think that they can look amongst themselves and they go, wow, that's pretty interesting. I've really helped change, I'm going to help change the future of the world. And so I think it's complementary to the pure, working the Washington insider game or the New York City UN insider game, is this private support, because it is making things happen. We are designing things. We are building test things. We are funding research on new technologies for detecting asteroids. We are publishing papers on the technology, and it's making a difference. So I think we're plugging away, and I'm pretty happy with where it's going. I think we're going to get there. So,
but it's very hard to tell you what you should do. That's extremely hard. In the long run, I want you to cheer what's been done and to squawk about what ought to have been done and ought to be done and is not being done. I think it takes both of those things, and you multiplied by millions.
and if you feel like donating, b612foundation.org. I have to throw that in there.
Hey, let me say that this man has spent, when I ran the organization for 11 years, as Ed just said, we did all the work ourselves. We didn't really need a lot of money. We needed a little bit for travel and paying hotels or something like that. But most of us, frankly, actually paid it ourselves out of our own savings over that 11 years. Ed decided to take on this big step when he saw that NASA was not going to step up to get this next job done, or at least it didn't look like they were, and said, okay, let's do it ourselves. And I don't think Ed realized at the time what he had just said. And even though a bicycle lane on the Oakland side of the Bay Bridge costs, the same thing, bicycles will use it, and you might ride, and et cetera. So it's a tough thing, and Ed has dedicated one incredible amount of energy to getting that done.
I'm crazy.
Yeah, and unfortunately, unfortunately he is.
I left a very high-paying job at Google to do this.
Okay, look, we've got to all stop and let you go. Thank you very, very much.
I can't say thank you enough to Ed and Rusty. I hope you found this as inspiring as I did. And I would challenge you with one thing. We videotaped this program. You have the opportunity, and we'll probably post it on our website in November. If you really believe in what they said is important, send it to other people. Make other people aware of it. I think it has to be kind of a grassroots something, and to be able to educate people that you know about this issue, I think would be absolutely wonderful. And this could be a nice catalyst to start things, because if people you know like it, they can send it to other people. So that's the challenge that I would present for you tonight. And thank you very much for coming. And thank you, Rusty and Ed, for a very stimulating talk and challenge for us.